So we're going to get everything started. Hi, my name is Victoria Alexander. I am the owner of Realty Collective that in June I will have owned for 17 years, miraculously. Realty Collective is a boutique real estate firm that I started to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers. If you're all in New York, you know the stereotypes associated with them. I'm also, your coach, your guide, your matchmaker, your therapist to guide you through this process of home buying. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and it's something that we have come to specialize in because we've built so many tools and resources to support people during this process to make it as least stressful as possible. It's always going to be stressful, but it doesn't have to be as stressful if you work with the right team of experts. So I'm going to hand it off to the dream team. First, I'm going to introduce Tina Fallon, who works with me here at Realty Collective. She is our other lead sales agent and also working with first-time home buyers. You want to just introduce yourself real quick, Tina?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tina. I'm really happy to be here. We love working with first-time home buyers, and we love working with Lisa and Rashida.
Great, thanks so much. Rashida, would you like to take over?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rashida Sadiq. I'm a partner in Serpico Sadiq PC. I have been representing clients, whether it's a purchase of a transaction, a co-op, condo, or a house, for going on 19 years. I represent clients in both New York City and in New Jersey, and I represent a lot of first-time buyers. So I'm looking forward to giving you information on what the process is like from the legal aspect.
Thank you. Lisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Lisa. I am a loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. I specialize with first-time home buyers. I love helping you guys buy your first house. I do condos, co-ops, multifamilies, you name it, I can do it. My primary business is New York City and in Brooklyn and Manhattan, but I also do business New Jersey, East Coast, and really all over the country. So I also have a lot of experience with self-employed borrowers, which we'll talk about, can be a little tricky, as well as people who live abroad. So we can talk about that as well. Really excited to hear your questions.
Okay, great. So again, I'm Victoria Alexander. These guys introduce themselves. I will say I am your real estate broker. I represent the buyer in the deal. When you walk into a piece of property from an open house on Street Easy and you see another broker there, they represent the seller. And so you should understand that they have the interest of the seller, the fiduciary interest of the seller at heart, and that they are going to be loyal always to the seller. So my job is to be your coach, your therapist, your sounding board, helping you through the emotional roller coaster that is the buying process. More literally, my job is to guide you through this process, give you an advice based on my 17 years of experience in the Brooklyn real estate market. I've almost experienced it all, except for the one experience Lisa and I had last week, which was new and interesting. It's my job to match you with your dream Brooklyn home, to protect you from your own instincts and help you get to the closing table. Plus, my services come as no cost to the buyer. Real estate brokers are paid by the seller and are wrapped into the seller's cost. And so you should not be not using a real estate broker because you are worried about the cost, no matter what the seller's paying for that percentage, whether it's directly to just the sales agent or to the sales agent plus the buyer's agent. So you need 3 people on your team. That is a real estate agent. So that could be Tina or I. You need a New York City real estate attorney. You need a mortgage professional those are the 3 people that you need as a buyer. Having the buyer's agent is important because of the fiduciary responsibility, which I talked about. You want to interview these people, make sure that you are comfortable speaking with them, that you can listen to advice from them, and their job is to guide you through this process at every step of the way. Personality types are important, so make sure that you get along and can listen to the advice that you're being given from everybody that you've decided to work with. And pick advisors that have relationships in the industry. You want to work with people that have New York City specific real estate advice. So why buy now? Tina, why should people buy now?
I'm sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. One reason to buy right now is that even though, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, interest rates are creeping up, the interest rates are still at really historically low levels. So buying now means that your purchasing money or your purchasing power comes at a lower cost than it has. For example, when I bought my first place, my interest rate was 8%. So, and in the 1970s, interest rates were as high as 20%. So the fact that things have crept up to like 3.5% and a little bit over, those are still historically low numbers. And that's a really good reason to buy now. Another reason to buy is just because you love New York and you plan on staying in New York. It's expensive to rent here. And so for a lot of people over the long term, it makes financial sense to own your own home. And the other thing is that it gives you an opportunity to express yourself in your home. If you're a longtime renter, it can be hard to not be able to renovate, to not be able to make a home that really suits you. And so there's an emotional reason to purchase that goes beyond the value of building that equity over time.
Great answer. What we usually provide to people to help them figure out right now if it is the time to buy or not is the rent versus buy matrix. Farah, could you go to the next slide, please? There we go. And this is a link that we're not, developers. We didn't make this formula. It is provided by the New York Times, and it's going to ask you a couple different qualifying questions and then tell you if, you plan on moving in 3 years out of state, that maybe buying in New York might not be right for you right now. So we're going to put the link in the chat to link there, but also it'll go in the follow-up email so you can figure out if now is the right time. So after you have decided that, hey, I might be interested in buying, you first assemble your dream team. And those are the big three: the inspector, the contractor. Oh God, those are the big three: the lawyer, the mortgage professional, and your real estate broker. But then you might need other people like a contractor, an architect, or an inspector to look at the property and make sure that you can make a sound decision in the property. And we have a list of people that we can recommend. So now that you've picked your attorney, your mortgage professional, your real estate broker, you need to, the first call I always tell everybody to make is to your mortgage professional, and they are going to help you figure out if the finances and the property line up for you and you're going to be able to make a purchase. So take it away, Lisa.
Great. So you decided you want to make the jump into buying a place in New York. The really important reason why you want to talk to me first is because you want to see how much you can get pre-approved for. That's because you don't want to look at places that are beyond your budget and you can't actually put an offer on them. You also don't want to undercut yourself, thinking, oh, I can only qualify for a $400,000 purchase. And maybe in fact, you can qualify for more. So it's really important that you talk to a mortgage professional first, so they can just give you an idea of what, you can qualify for. It's very personal, actually, getting pre-approved, in the sense of what I mean is that there are a lot of factors that go into me pre-approving you for a mortgage. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, like what kind of property are you looking for? Do you think you're going to be there for 5 years, or do you think this is going to be a property you're going to be in for a long time? What's your job history? If you're self-employed, how long have you been self-employed? All of these answers are really important to figure out the right program for you. It's really, really important when you talk to a mortgage professional that you talk to someone who is specialized in New York City. New York City real estate and mortgage functions completely different than the rest of the country. So talking to a Rocket Mortgage or bettermortgage.com or something like that, they might be giving you answers based on buying a place in Denver, which is totally different than buying a co-op in Brooklyn. So it's really, really important that you talk to someone that understands sort of what you're looking at. Also, what's sort of cool about me and Cross Country Mortgage is that we are a private mortgage lending bank, which means that we work like all of the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. And we have a bunch of different products. So that allows me to sort of find the right product for you. rather than just talking about our 30-year fix. That might be the right product for you, that might not. In terms of how much you put down, there's a lot of flexibility. The standard is 20%. If you're looking at a co-op, you're probably going to be putting 20% down. If you're looking at a condo or a single or multifamily home, you can go less than that. You can go 10%, 15%. You can also do FHA, which is as low as 3.5%. If you do less than 20% down, you pay mortgage insurance. Private mortgage insurance, which is what you do if you don't go through FHA, is really inexpensive right now. So a lot of my borrowers are going that route just because they don't have the 20% down payment. About credit scores, your credit will be run for pre-approval. It's really important because that's what gives us the full picture so that we know that a pre-approval works. So the pre-approval is basically a working draft. So after we crunch our numbers and you guys fill out an application, I'll get you a pre-approval, and then those numbers are not set in stone. So as you start seeing things with Victoria and Tina, we can sort of tweak that pre-approval to be the place that you actually buy. A few things you need to know: if you're self-employed, it's really important that I see your tax returns for the last 2 years. If you have not filed your 2021 tax returns, definitely talk to me before you file them. That is basically the general rule with self-employment, is if you pay taxes on it, it's income to qualify. If you don't pay taxes on it, we can't use that income to qualify. There are a few nuances, but that's the general rule, which is why I love to see drafts of tax returns before you file them. And then I can work with your accountant to sort of tweak those returns to get you in the best place for buying power for this year. And what else was I going to say? Self-employed, credit scores. Oh, and the most important thing is after you get pre-approved, you have to realize that basically I'm using the snapshot of your financial picture to pre-approve you. So if you change jobs, if you buy a car, these are things that I need to know about before you do them. Okay, Giddy, the classic that I actually made this mistake when I bought a house, so I don't blame you if you do. If you get a lease on a car, that's going to hit your mortgage. And that means you have to tweak things around. So it doesn't mean you can't get a new car when you're looking for a house, but you want to talk to me before you do that. Okay. And yeah, other than that, I give you that pre-approval. You go out with Victoria and Tina, and then it's really a constant discussion as you guys find the right thing that, you know, works within your budget and what you want.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry about that interruption, everybody. I'm just going to recap a couple things. The first place you start is by talking to a mortgage professional, not on StreetEasy. You want to get pre-approved before you start looking. If you're self-employed or you have some intricacies on your tax returns, you want to talk to a mortgage professional first so that you're presenting the best version of yourself and your finances. Two other things: do not hire your uncle, your friend. You want to hire New York City real estate experts that are experts in their field and the industry, not just anybody. And you want to stay away from companies like Better and Rocket and Quicken. Those mortgages are not competitive here in New York, and they're not going to get you to actually to the closing table, and you're just going to make a stressful process even more stressful. So let's move on. So you've decided to buy a home. Next slide. Where do you search? Oh, wait. Yeah, these are the questions you need to ask yourself to start the search. How long are you going to live there? Are you going to start a family in this home? Does the school district matter to you? As real estate brokers, I can't tell you what school district a property is in. You have to do that research on your own. So if it is important to you, you need to take that into consideration and be checking each property. Does your commute matter to you now or in the future? What sort of amenities do you want to be near? Do you want to be in Brownstone, Brooklyn, or do you want to be in new construction? Sometimes it's hard to have both. Do you want to be near the park? What type of home do you want? Understanding the rules and regulations around co-ops and differences between co-ops and condos is super important as well. You don't want to be caught off guard that when you're applying for a co-op, there's a huge co-op application process to go through. Understanding the neighborhood. What do you want to feel when you walk outside your door? And what's your timing? Are you going to be looking in 1 to 3 months or 5 years? And budget. How do you want to spend and how much do you want after you close in your bank? And what do you want your monthly expenses to be? Understanding that, you know, if you want your monthly expenses to be on $3,000, purchase price is not the only thing that you need to take into account. You need to take into account your taxes and your maintenance and or common charges. So when we move on to finding the home, where do you start searching? The internet has changed everything. So you're no longer looking at a paper version of the Village Voice or on Craigslist or on the New York Times. I feel like we've moved away from all of those platforms, and most people are making real estate really transparent and putting their properties on websites like StreetEasy. StreetEasy is owned by Zillow. So if you're looking on Zillow, you're probably just repeating everything that's on StreetEasy. And I think StreetEasy is a more user-friendly platform. But there's also Realtor.com, Redfin, Trulia. There's lots of different places to look. And New York City does not have an MLS currently. There is an ethics association called the Real Estate Board of New York, and they are working on creating one platform for all members of the Real Estate Board of New York, but it would still not be all encompassing of all the listings that are out there. And the days are over of those off-market properties. REBNY has also changed that. I will get an email once in a while from a real estate broker saying, hey, Victoria, I know that you have clients in this building or in this area. You know, are you working with anybody that might be interested in this property? It's going to come to market. But if you have listed as a seller, if you've listed your property for sale with a REBNY broker, it will always actually hit the market, and deals will not usually be done on the side and off market. So if you're looking to work with a real estate broker because they're going to get you something that's never going to hit the market, there are strategies for that, but it's not for something that's actually going to be listed. And we can talk more about that. When you're looking at listings online, what they also do is put other brokers' information on listings that aren't theirs. So you see something at 100 Congress Street. The seller's agent is Susie, but people pay to have their name come up over Susie's name. So StreetEasy and Zillow might put you in touch with a real estate broker named Sean because he's paid for his name to be presented on that listing. And that's why it's so important. You don't want to end up with somebody, you want to choose the person you're working with. So it's important to work with a buyer's broker that you've vetted and have a comfortable relationship with before going down this process, because the way that marketing and internet platforms work these days, they might be making a choice for you if you're not careful. And work with the buyers, they represent you. And you work together to create a competitive strategy to make sure that you understand every step of the way and can make decisive decisions based on your education that you're getting from your real estate broker. And we have a condo versus co-op personality quiz that you can also take to figure out which type of property might be good for you. I'm going to post a link now about some different types of properties, like pre-war versus new construction, and the cost and property types, property amenities that are associated with both. Building typology is a big part of understanding what neighborhoods you'd possibly be interested in. A lot of people want to live in Cobble Hill and live in a brownstone, but it's really hard to find a condoed brownstone these days because they're in high demand and not a lot of people have done that. Or live in new construction, and there's just not a ton of new construction there either because it's a historic landmark neighborhood with 1 to 4 family homes. So if you want to live in Williamsburg, you probably wouldn't find a co-op either. So understanding what those things are. I most likely tell people to make a list of 5 things that are their non-negotiables, and then even from there, you're probably going to only get 2 or 3 of those things that are on your must-have 5 list. The other thing to be aware of that not only is purchase price important and then your monthly payments, but understanding your closing costs. Co-ops are 1 to 3% for closing costs, an average of $4,000 to $5,000, and 3 to 5% for condos. And new construction, there's a lot of fees baked into those, so you have to really work with somebody that can disclose all those fees to you. Sellers' closing costs are about 8%. Tina, do you want to talk a little bit about making an offer and negotiating?
Sure. I'm happy to talk about making an offer and negotiating. So one of the things about how we think about representing our buyers is that the seller of the property is the expert in the property, and our job is to be the expert in you. So we really want to put together a whole, like, we're telling the story of you to the people who are selling. And you'd be surprised at how emotional that choice is for a seller, that they're going to be selecting who's going to be living in their home. And this is even true for like real estate developers and sponsors. They are, it's something, it matters to them who you are. And so we are going to be telling the story of who you are in a really consistent way, with your consent, obviously, with your collaboration. So, but when we're making an offer, we're taking a lot of different things into consideration for you. So, so not just the price, as Victoria had mentioned, there's also obviously those common charges that are going to be a monthly cost that is added to your mortgage. And then there's also like some places where we can negotiate in terms. So sometimes we can say, they're willing to pay this much money, but they would like the sponsor to pay their own closing costs. Or we can say we want to close on in July. Can we have a longer contract period? So there's a lot of different terms, not just the amount of money that you're willing to offer, but a kind of whole picture of who you are. And that is something that we'll work on both with your mortgage broker and with your attorney, in addition to working with you as we negotiate that. And one thing I'll say about the way that I work, and I think Victoria works this way too, is that there's always this sense of like, you're supposed to have like a poker face when you're going and you're seeing something. Like if you go and you see something and you like it, you're supposed to pretend you don't like it. We find that that's actually not effective for our buyers. Like your job, you're so protected. You've got your attorney, you got your bank, you've got your inspector, you've got us. We have so many people here to protect you from making a bad decision, that your job is to just go out there and fall in love with something. And if you show love for a place while you're in it, the broker is going to be more likely to want to deal with you than they will with somebody who's got like a really good poker face. So don't worry about that whole idea of like playing it close to the vest. You don't have to do that because we're really good negotiators and we'll make sure to get you the best deal. I think I totally went off script there. Sorry.
Yeah, you went off script. That's okay.
Okay.
Because you want to say your important things that are important to you at this part of the process. So the other thing that I think Tina left out is that working with somebody that has really deep relationships in the industry, when you're working with brokers that you've known for 15 years, and they, like Tina feels, she told me this morning about an offer she put in, the other broker we've done a lot of deals with. And so they're more likely to pick our deal over another buyer's deal that they don't have a relationship with the other real estate broker. They haven't closed a deal with them, so they don't know what kind of team player they are. Because really, I keep talking about your dream team. It's true. Everybody here is working in a team to get to the finish line together, and understanding who the other players are. Like if you were working in a job and you had to create your own team for a project, you would want the best people on your team to make sure that it went smooth and seamless and you created a great product at the end of the day. And that's what our job is as well. So understanding, working with seasoned professionals that have relationships in the industry and that have, expertise from doing this for a really long time in the areas that you're specifically looking at. So the other thing, do you usually have a negotiation strategy, Tina, that you work with on people?
Yeah, I think, my negotiation strategy, everybody's negotiation strategy is going to be a little bit different. But one thing that we find is like demonstrated interest really makes a difference. So clear communication with the selling agent and making sure that you are always, that you're moving as quickly as you can. So being the first people in to make an offer is actually a really good position to be in, because the sellers know to take you seriously. Making sure you have your pre-approval, and making sure your pre-approval reflects the number that you are offering, not the total that you're pre-approved for, but the number that you're offering. And somebody like Lisa is really good at providing, you know, a pre-approval letter that exactly matches the offer that we're going to submit. That's really important. And having your attorney's contact information listed on the offer is also a sign that you're really serious. Those are things that you want to be able to have in your first offer and not be scrambling to get after you find something that you really like. So those are just things, like just key things to have together. And then I think the other thing, and we'll get a little bit more into this, is that like deciding what your contingencies are. So as I was saying, you may want to close a little bit later, but if you're getting a mortgage, you're going to want a financing contingency. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that means that if for any reason you're not able to obtain the loan, that you will be released from your contract and your deposit refunded to you. Sometimes there's pressure to remove that financing contingency, but we're always going to work hard to try to keep that in so that you're really protected. And the other thing is that your offer can be based on the assumptions that you're making about the home. So you get to go in, you take a look at it, it looks great, but when you do your inspection, you may find out that, you know, the boiler needs to be replaced really soon. Your offer is going to be based on what you can see. It's not based on all those unseen things. So if you have an inspection contingency, most people are going to want you to do that inspection prior to contract signing. And so you're going to have another opportunity to negotiate if you find out that if the inspection uncover something that you didn't know when you were making your initial offer. So I always say there's tons of off ramps. An accepted offer is not legally binding. So if you change your mind about something after you've made an offer, you're going to be able to walk away from that if you want to. But it is also opportunities for the seller to walk away. So I always say that time is the deal killer, making sure you have everybody on your team moving as fast as they can to do a thorough job of vetting everything before you sign a contract. It's really the best way to ensure that your offer is going to stick.
Thanks. Lisa or Rashida, do you have any input on like when we're putting the offer in and negotiating before the deal sheets go out, the terms that you need to be aware of for either the as is or the contingencies?
Yes, so I mean, as the attorney, we normally come into play once the offer has been accepted. But definitely some of the things that we want to make sure, because when we get that deal sheet, the more information that's in there, the less likelihood that the seller is going to say, well, this is just coming up during this time at the contract signing, and walk away from the transaction. So going in there, as Tina had mentioned, if you're getting a mortgage, you want to make sure that there's a mortgage contingency, that they put that on the deal sheet. How much of a mortgage are you applying for? Are you doing a 90% financing? Are you doing 80% financing? Are you putting down a 10% on signing of the contract? Or are you putting down 3.5% or something less? Are you getting an FHA mortgage, or are you getting a conventional mortgage? So even though it's not that you don't have the contract, that deal sheet is very important, because those are the terms that we incorporate into the contract of sale. The deal sheet will have it that is an as-is condition, but once again, you do your inspection prior to you signing the contract, so you understand what that as-is condition, and your attorney will explain to you what that as-is condition, when you get to that point that you're actually signing the contract, you've done your inspection, things have been negotiated regarding repairs or credits. So now you understand what the as-is means in terms of the condition of the property. But those are definitely some of the key items that during that offer negotiation, you want to make sure that is incorporated into that deal sheet. And then when we get into the contract portion of it, we make sure that it's incorporated into the contract of sale. And whether it's a new construction and you're negotiating the seller paying fees or seller credits and things like that. Also, once again, if it's on the deal sheet, great, because it can be incorporated, but we can always tweak that once we get into the point of going into contract.
Great. Lisa, anything before we sign contracts that you
I mean, we love, like, to echo Rashida, we love to have as much in the deal sheet as possible, just to sort of know what's going on. But the contract is really the important part. So when Rashida negotiates the terms of the contract, that's where, like, Rashida, I'm sure you'll talk about it in a second, but that's when like mortgage contingency, deadlines, those things are very, very important from a mortgage perspective. Just to preface before Rashida starts, like, if the plan is you guys are going to close in 30 days on a New York property, that is something you want to talk to your mortgage person about before you sign that contract. Because as everyone here will attest, I am incredibly fast, but there's a New York property, it's not closing in 30 days. Unless it's vacant, seller's ready to go. There's like, I mean, so many things have to be possible to make that miracle happen. That it's possible, but you don't want that in your contract because then you're on the hook if it doesn't close. And Rashida will talk about that right now.
Yeah, Richard, do you want to talk about the terms that are in the contract and understanding the deadlines, the due diligence, closing times, and
so as Lisa had mentioned, now your deal sheet's been sent out, you've done your inspection because that's done prior to you signing the contract. The seller's attorney sends your buyer's attorney the contract of sale. It's a draft contract, and then we add in additional provisions called riders to the contract of sale. And we want to make sure that you're protected as the buyer. The seller's attorney also wants to make sure the seller's is protected. So we try to compromise on some of the terms, and hopefully everyone gets what they want, as close to what they want to do. The main thing in contracts we always want to talk about is your contingencies and your timeframes. New York is an on or about, typically your contract closing date is on or about 60 days, which means that there's a grace period built in for 30 days into that closing date. I say this to say because there's so many moving parts. There's your mortgage. If you're getting a mortgage, if you're buying a co-op, there's the co-op board approval. If you're getting buying a condo, there's getting what we call as a right of first refusal from the condominium. So we always want to make sure that you clearly understand that time period for closing of on or about 60 days from when the contract is fully signed. The other contingency that's very important is your mortgage contingency. Lisa mentioned that as far as the timeframes. Standard contract has either 30 or 45-day time period for you to get your mortgage. Yes, you've been pre-approved, great. You know, you've spoken to Lisa, but now the nitty-gritty happens when you're actually in contract. They have to get the appraisal done. They have to either, approve the co-op if it's a co-op, approve the condominium, get certain documents, financials, et cetera. A lot goes behind the scenes in that 30 to 45-day period. And you want to make sure that you are covered, because if you put in, you accept an offer and you said, I can get a mortgage, I've been pre-approved and I'm going to close in 30 days and I'm going to get my mortgage in 10 days. That's probably not going to happen, unless, so you want to make sure you understand that 30 to 45-day period, you have the time so the appraisal can be done because that's part of your mortgage. You want to make sure that you didn't waive that appraisal contingency. The market is really hot. I'm getting contracts now where they're like, the person's overbid by 100,000, 125,000. What happens when you overbid and now you have to get the appraisal? It has to appraise for that price that you purchased it at, or negotiated that if you have additional funds, if it doesn't appraise for that amount, how much additional funds do you really have to make up that difference, and that we put a floor into the contract of sale. So it's always great to go in there really great with the negotiations, but always want to make sure that the contract encompasses that, because ultimately you don't want to lose your deposit, because that's what's on the line when you miss these deadlines or you don't have understand the timing wise for the contracts. But mortgage contingency, time period of close. I won't talk so much about the title, but that basically says that the seller has the right to sell you the property. There's no judgments, liens, violations on the premises. So that's another contingency. But the main thing that we kind of focus on is specifically, it would be that mortgage contingency. If you're buying a co-op, the approval by the co-op contingency, and of course your time periods to close. Due diligence prior to you get it into contract. When you're looking at a condo or a co-op, that due diligence is really important, because your attorney, it looks fabulous, but you're buying into a corporation, you're buying into a condo association. Are the financials good? have they had maintenance increases of 10% for the last 4 years? Have you factored that into your budget? These are things you don't know when you put in your offer. So that due diligence, your attorney has to find out this information. Is there litigation? What's the history of maintenance increases? Are they operating at a deficit? Are there upcoming assessments because they have major work to do with the facade or the roof? There's leaks, there's litigation going on in the property. Because once again, the more informed you are, you know what type of property you're buying into, especially when it comes with a co-op and a condo, because those maintenance and those common charges, they're not going to stay the same for the entire lifetime of your property ownership. So you have to account for that being as a budgeted item in addition to your mortgage. So you want to see the kind of the history, what's happening in that building. We can't guarantee that it will stay the same. We can't guarantee that it's going to go up, but the more informed you are, the more you can budget for that and understand the type of building that you're buying into. So that's your due diligence. It typically takes about a week. We try to move pretty quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, less depending on the building and how quickly your attorney gets documents, but you don't sign the contract until the due diligence is completed. You understand it until the contract terms are finalized so that you understand your time periods as well. So those are your main contract terms. We talked about as is a little bit with inspection. As is means you saw the property, you've done your inspection, you are going to close in the same condition when you saw the property at the closing date. So it's important for that inspection because if the the boiler isn't working and you said, I didn't do my inspection, and you do your walkthrough and it turns out the boiler isn't working, you can't say, no, I'm not purchasing it because it wasn't working when you signed the contract and you didn't do your inspection. But if it wasn't working when you did your inspection and you're able to negotiate the terms for them to repair it or give you a credit, then we incorporate that into the contract and you understand what you're getting when you're saying as is condition.
Thanks, Lisa. So, Rashida, thanks. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about the turn times and underwriting and what's happening once contracts are signed from the financial perspective?
Sure. I just want to add 2 things to what Rashida said that's so important. So the due diligence is really, really important, particularly if you're buying a co-op. And I think this is one example of why it's so important to work with a team that communicates with one another. Because like when Rashida does due diligence, she does an awesome job. And she'll like email me and be like, hey, I found this. Is this going to be an issue? Or I found this. Is that okay? For the mortgage perspective. So I have like sort of a heads up. I have a loan right now, not with Rashida, that's in a Westchester co-op deal. And the attorney didn't mention when he did his due diligence, a flip tax issue that now I found out on the questionnaire, I can still do the deal, but it's going to change things that if I'd known about it up front would have saved some time. So I think it's one example of just sort of, when you work with a team, we all communicate throughout the process, which inevitably helps you from having surprises that make delays or having to change loans around or whatever. But yes, so once you have a fully executed contract, then from my side, it's considered a live deal, which means that we order the appraisal, we get everything ready so that you get initial disclosures to e-sign. And basically what me and my team are doing is getting everything ready so we can get you through underwriting as quickly as possible. This is really important because, for example, if you buy a co-op, you have to have a co-op interview. The co-op board will not look at your package or schedule the interview until they have what's called a mortgage commitment letter. You will not get that until you get through underwriting. So the faster the underwriting turn times are with the mortgage company you use, the faster you're going to get in front of a co-op board, which means the faster you're going to get to a clear to close situation. Me and my team are super fast, which is, I think, one thing that really makes us stand out. So we're going to get you through underwriting really quickly. And we're also going to make sure that we have everything up front that the underwriter will need so that they can approve you as quickly as possible. In terms of the appraisal, Rashida is 100% right. This is a crazy market right now. People are overbidding. I would never recommend anybody waive their appraisal or mortgage contingency because those are there to protect you. I do have to say that if the appraisal does come in low, you do have more options than just putting more down. You have different programs that we can work with. That mortgage insurance, like I said, is really cheap. So we can restructure the deal if the appraisal comes in low. And that's just a conversation you want to have with your mortgage professional as you look at putting in the offer. Once we have the underwriting approval, it'll come back. Basically, it's the stamp from the bank that says this loan meets all of our rules, and they'll have a few conditions. One of the conditions will be, co-op approval or condo approval, because we both approve the building and the mortgage. Another will be insurance. You have to get insurance for your property, and little things like that. And basically, your job after the approval comes in will be, if you're buying a co-op, submitting that co-op package that Victoria and Tina have helped make lovely. You will get any other conditions that the underwriter needs, and then we will be in a clear to close situation, which basically means we're good. We're ready to schedule this and close it.
Thanks, Lisa. Do you want to talk so I agree that we're going to create a beautiful co-op package for you if you do end up buying a co-op. It's a big lift, and having somebody that works with you to organize all your documents and make them beautiful and present you the best light to the co-op board to make sure you get approved is super, super important. So if you're going a co-op route, make sure that you familiarize yourself with what that will look like, because there's all of your personal information will be laid out before the co-op board, and it is nothing personal. They do this to everybody.
And Victoria, a shout out to you as well, because on that same co-op, the realtor is like, said, hey, let me know when this goes to the board package. And she's like, I'm not really involved in that. And I'm like, really?
What?
Because the realtor should be helping you, because it's part of the job. Like, you want to put your best foot forward, and your realtors know what the co-op wants, know what they want to hear, and will help make that happen. So, Victoria and Tina do a really, really good job of making sure that you say what the co-op wants you to say, so that they love you and you don't have any issues.
Knock on wood. I've only had one co-op interview not go through in the 17 years of it, and it was during COVID, and I don't think it had anything to do with the board package. It had to do with something my client slipped up on. Do you want to talk a little bit, Lisa, just quickly about rate lock, especially in the co-op scenario?
Sure. So as Tina mentioned, rates have gone up. It's not Armageddon. It's not 8%. It has been ridiculously low for the last 2 years, like unreasonably low. And now rates are starting to go up. So what that means is that you want to make sure that you are pre-qualified for this volatile rate environment, which means that, if you're looking for a place now, but you're not going to find it for 3 months, you want to make sure that there's some wiggle room in your pre-approval there, so that when you find the right place, if rates have gone up, you're still qualified. In terms of rate lock is really important. Because once you lock in your rate, you're on a time frame. So if you don't close before that lock expires, you have to pay an extension fee. And as Rashida can attest, the seller's not going to pay the extension fee, even if you're ready to go and it's that the co-op attorney won't close. That's on you, because it's your decision when to lock. So locking is a bit of a dance. With co-ops, if a co-op approval is required, I very rarely lock in a co-op up front. And if I do, I really explain to my borrowers the chances they're taking, because with the co-op, you can submit your application and they can say, hey, come in tomorrow, let's do this interview. Or they can say, the first time we can talk to you is next week. And, you are basically at the mercy of the co-op in terms of when you have that interview. So it's really important to sort of have a really honest discussion with your mortgage officer about locking in, about the positives and negatives, and also just really having a realistic understanding of timeframes. Like Rashida mentioned, you have the on or about, which both helps and hurts you. Like if you say, oh, well, I'm gonna close, my contract says April 20th, I'm closing April 20th. Well, there's that 30-day situation going on there. I have a deal right now that it's an older lady and she's like, no, I'm not closing until I'm back in town, which won't be till May 1st. So, it's a little bit of a dance, and it's really just about making sure that you're working with someone you really trust, and then making sure that they lay out all of the options to you so that you 100% get the best rate you can, but also you understand the risks you're taking if you lock in too early.
And then anything you guys want to touch upon about title search or the Aztec agreements, and then or doing the final walkthrough and getting to the closing table?
So I would just want to once again reiterate the lock-in timeframes and just really having that discussion about the on or about, and reiterating that with the house and a condo, on or about 60 days realistically gives you 90 days to close. So you always want to try to make sure that your lock-in is past that, encompasses that extra 30 days if possible, and even an extra couple of days after that. Because your attorney is what we call, the closes in New York are not time of essence. So even after that 30-day period, we have to send out a time of essence notice, which is another 14 days. And it's a really big, dance. And sometimes buyers don't understand that really, yes, you have that in the contract, but there's steps that have to go, that it's not an automatic, the seller is going to pay for your extension fees or things like that. The co-op is delaying it, so it's not the sellers that's causing the delay. And with the co-op, you have it in there that they have to approve you. So unfortunately, we're at the mercy sometimes of that co-op. And we have provisions in there regarding extending 30 days, but once again, it's that 30-day time period and going through the process of whether are you really going to cancel the contract if they don't give you that approval on that 31st date, and things like that. Victoria had mentioned some documents that for co-ops, that as there's a bank attorney that gets thrown into this section here at some point, that they have to get you certain documents. They have to also review the title report to make sure that the bank is protected, just like you're protected. The bank is giving you a mortgage, so they want to make sure that they don't have any issues if it goes into that situation where they have to foreclose. So they want to be able to sell the property as well. So the co-op has to recognize that you're getting a mortgage. So they have to get certain documents that have to sign. So there's so many different people in the mix, but as your attorney, as your agent, as your loan officer, we're in the background making sure that those other tangential people are getting the documents that they want. And you're focused on getting the documents as far as your mortgage and being prepared to close when the time is ready, and for the interview when its time is ready. Closing, so great news. You've got approval, you've got interviewed by the board, or you got the bank clearance for your condo and your house and you're ready to close. Your attorney now has to schedule the closing with all of those people that I kind of just mentioned. So I call it like a juggling act, because everyone has to be available. We're back to doing in-person closings. We're still doing a little bit of these remote hybrid closings, but for the most part, the closings are now in person. So you have to show up. The seller has to show up. The bank attorney, your attorney, the other side's attorney, the co-op attorney, the title closer, the payoff. So think about getting 9 people into a room available on the same day at the same time, and you're not the only person that's closing in New York City, and they have other deals. So it's your attorney is kind of the main focus person on the buy as a buyer that's going to get all of these parties into the mix. So I like to tell my clients, give me your range of dates and your availability. So I know when I'm starting to go back and forth with all the parties, that we have some flexibility. So you can't say, Rashida, I only can close at 3 p.m. on Friday. You're probably going to close in 3 weeks if that's your only day in availability. You have to have some flexibility. scheduling. Obviously, if you have rate issues, we try to get you in as quickly as possible, and so you don't lose your rate or you have to pay extension fees. If you have to move, those type of things, we really try to put the pressure on to get you the available. But closing is definitely a juggling act, and your attorney is the one that has to coordinate with all the parties. Once they get the go-ahead from the bank that you're cleared, the bank is just ready for them to schedule, and they get a go-ahead if you're buying a co-op, that the co-op is approved, and then the co-op side is ready to close as well. You do a walkthrough where Victoria and your realtors become involved, and day before, typically before the closing, make sure that nothing has changed from when you saw that property, because now it's 60 days after. You probably haven't gone back to the property since you initially put in that offer or you did that inspection. So it can be 60 to 90 days. And now you have to go back and say, wow, it's empty. I want to make sure that, you know, everything's still working, the plumbing, the electrical, because once you close, it's your property. If the dishwasher breaks down the day after the closing, you can't go back to the seller and say, hey, the dishwasher isn't working. You close, it's your responsibility. You have to replace that dishwasher the day after the closing. So you want to make sure that everything is checked during that walkthrough. You want to make sure that you have sufficient time. You want to make sure that it's not rushed the morning of the closing so you miss something, or if something comes up, that the realtors can notify your attorney. We can try to get estimates, we can do credits and things like that on what could happen during that time period. Because your closing date should really be, your closing should hopefully be a very exciting time. You should go leave there happy and shouldn't, it's already nervous. You're giving up this big chunk of your final amount, and you really want to leave there happy at the end of after signing for an hour and a half to 2 hours of documents.
It's a lot of signing. There's a lot of signing, there's a lot of people, and it hopefully should be a very happy, exciting day. So everybody, you're going to show up. You probably will not get the numbers or information for it to show up at closing until the day of. I know that's always nerve-wracking for people. I'm just going to wrap everything up. Tina and or Lisa or Rashida, anything else you want to add before we go to questions? No? Okay. Nobody's jumping in there. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the resources we provide. After this, you're going to video link, go ahead, share that out. You're going to get a copy of our home buyer handbook. We handle each buyer with a project manager tool called Basecamp, where we have tons of resources that help you educate yourself with our guidance about each step of the process. So every step of the way, you are as informed as you can be and understand just the different intricacies, because this is not your expertise of New York City real estate. We can schedule a call after this to talk more. I'll be sending out a link to do that for any one of us. And of course, reach out to us if you need anything. This is the end of the presentation, and we're going to open it up for questions if there are any in the chat. Last time we had so many. And we're happy to stay on as long as we possibly can to answer anything you might be wanting to find out about specifically that we did not cover here today. And sorry for my fumbling here. Oh, Valerie had to hop off and said it was a great presentation. Thank you. Any other questions, you can put them in the chat. If there's no questions, I wouldn't mind ending at 6 for this one. It feels really unrealistic to afford anything in New York City that is not a shoebox to you. What is a realistic amount can you expect for a down payment in Park Slope or Gowanus? Realistic amount you can expect for a down payment. So it depends, on the property type. And if there are co-ops that allow for 10% down, you would have to ask ahead of time. I would say if you're looking for a co-op, in Park Slope or Gowanus, I mean, you might be able to get a 1-bedroom under 700,000. So that would mean you'd want at least 70,000. Do you recommend being debt-free before you're? So, I mean, the down payment things if you're having a hard time saving for a down payment, we can talk about those that specifically. I can send you some links on how you can do that. Working with a financial advisor or financial coach, like somebody like the financial gym, can really help you figure out how to save for down payment. You can also borrow against your 401k, and we have tons of resources like that in the home buying handbook, trying to figure out how to get there. I don't recommend being debt free. I wasn't debt free when I bought my house. But Lisa, do you want to talk about when banks are looking at your
Yeah,
debt,
no.
what that looks like to you?
So as long as your credit score is good, which means that, you haven't been not making payments on your debt, then there's no reason to, for example, pay off a car loan or a student loan to help you get qualified for a mortgage. You should definitely, talk to me first about getting qualified, because, for example, if you can't get qualified based on your debt, you can always pay some of that off at closing. It's not like you have to pay it off before to be qualified. So I would, I still have student loans. I did not pay off that debt when I bought my home. And, I think it's really smart to sort of see what you can get pre-qualified for first, and then figure out if there's a debt issue that needs to be resolved after that.
Somebody asked if we would recommend waiting for the market to cool down. It's always a balancing act. Tina, you want to take it?
I do want to jump in here. One of the things, like we always say, that market timing, like you really can't time the market. There's a time when it's right for you, and that's probably the best time for you to buy. But I do sense, and this is more like art than science, but with interest rates rising, with war in Europe, and the fact that there are a lot of people who are exhausted by the buying process right now. They've been outbid so many times, that I am sensing that we're coming to a point where there's going to be more opportunities for buyers than there have been recently. I think we're also going to see a lot more inventory come to market soon. So at this moment, when other people are scared, when there's this sort of sense of fear that interest rates are going to rise, that's usually a good time to be a buyer, if you can act decisively. So it may not be that you can get something for a significantly better price. It might be that you can get something at all. A lot of people are just being outbid left and right now. And I'm seeing, for the first time in 2022, I'm seeing more flexibility for buyers than I had seen before. But that's the market read from this week. It could all change in a couple of weeks.
And COVID's made a lot of understanding the market very hard. It hasn't been, our normal, these are the signs and triggers that will understand what happens next. So there's just been a lot of curveballs. So to cool down, the market's always hot. It's New York City. The market, even when the only time that there was this amazing blip was at the first 3 to 6 months of COVID, when everything was on pause or hold. And there was some people that took advantage of that opportunity. But besides that, New York, it's always a crazy buyer's market or a crazy seller's market. And with interest rates so low, I was really disappointed in myself that I didn't take advantage of the low interest rates. When I bought my house 12 years ago, it was over 5%. I paid 5.25. I refied and I'm down to 4.25, but it's still an amazing time to be buying, especially because prices aren't gonna, unless there's some thing that happens that would make New York City extremely undesirable in the future, which COVID proved that wasn't true. New York City, the prices are always going to be going up and feeling like the market's hot, right? So cooling down is just not something I think that is in New York City's blood. Can closing costs be included into the monthly mortgage? So when I bought my house, because it was a single family home, I was allowed to wrap my closing costs into my purchase. Lisa or Rashida, you want to talk about if those products still exist and if you can still do them and under what circumstances?
So I'll answer 2 of these questions and then I have to jump off because I have to relieve my nanny. So I'm going to answer this one and the one about credit, and then I might jump off, and Rashida, you can add anything. So in terms of the closing costs, so right now there's only really 2 real ways to include closing costs. The first is if you get a seller's credit. So Rashida does her magic and in negotiation gets a seller's credit, that credit, let's say $2,500. That seller's credit of $2,500 is used to help your closing costs. Option 2 is that you get a higher rate and then you use a lender's credit to help with the closing costs. So what I always tell my borrowers is like, you can get the lowest rate possible, or you can get a lender's credit to help with the closing costs, but I can't do both. So that's sort of a conversation to have. Just so you know, if you have a refinance, as long as the equity's in the property, you can roll in your closing costs. So it's all about the equity. In terms of the hard, someone asked about credit and hard inquiries on your credit. So to get a real pre-approval, and by that I mean a pre-approval that makes sense, that is legit, that you know that you're pre-approved, you have to run your credit. You have to see what's on your credit report, because that is fundamental to getting pre-approved for a mortgage. It is a hard inquiry, but mortgage is a protected category. So it's not the same effect on your credit as opening up a new credit card or something like that. So again, if you have concerns about that, that's a conversation we can have before I run your credit. I only run it once, and it's good for as long as your credit report is good for, and I won't run it again without asking you. But it is really an important part of getting pre-approved, because if you don't run your credit, then you're not really sure that the deal works, because your credit score and your credit report is essential to getting pre-approved. So I'm going to jump off because my nanny's chomping at the bit. But
Thanks so much, Lisa.
Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll just see you guys next time.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other questions? Or Rashida, anything else you wanted to add to what Lisa was saying?
Just for rolling in the closing costs into your mortgage, one thing that you want to have a conversation, there's a thing called a seller's concession. It sounds like the seller is giving you a credit, but also what it means is that you're raising the price of the initial purchase price by, let's say, $10,000 in order to increase your mortgage amount. And that's where you're actually rolling in your mortgage, your closing costs into your mortgage. So it's called a seller's concession, where the price is increased by that amount. The property does have to appraise for that amount. And you definitely want to have a conversation with your loan officer, because depending on the type of loan you're getting, FHA has a certain requirement on the maximum amount of a seller's concession. A conventional loan may have a certain a limit as that. But I've had clients that, I have one that we're doing right now. The property appraised at $670. They're in contract for $660. They're able to include a $10,000 concession. The seller is still getting the $660, but they're able to incorporate that $10,000 credit and into the mortgage, where the mortgage is increased by that. So they're financing, in essence, your closing costs. The seller isn't paying your closing costs, you're financing your closing costs.
Somebody asked, what is a lien? And then somebody asked, in addition to the down payment, how much are closing costs for all the closing costs, lawyer, broker? So mortgage broker and lawyer are wrapped into your closing costs. It's part of your closing costs. And we have a calculator that I can share with you. It's linked through the buying handbook for the closing costs. But I think I said earlier, co-ops are about 1% to 3%, 3% to 4% for condos. So you want to add that into the percentage of the purchase price that you're looking for. Up in there, look, Farah dropped a link into a helpful article about closing costs. But do you want to, Rashida, quick, what is a lien?
I'm thinking the easiest way to explain it is, I guess, an attachment to the property. So you can't sell your property until it's paid off, because this person owes you something, or you owe someone something. So for instance, a mortgage is considered a lien. So you can't sell your property unless you pay off the mortgage, because you owe the bank money. If you have a judgment against your parking ticket, and it's now a judgment, you can't sell your property or purchase a property until you pay off that judgment, because that entity can have an interest, or they kind of take that property as collateral. And that's what a lien means, that you owe something to someone on the property. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. Hopefully I was clear.
I thought that was good. Any other questions? If a property is in probate, can it still be bought or sold?
So it can, but you have to make sure you have the applicable paperwork. So probate means that you started somebody's deceased, and they have to get authority to sell the property. So you can, once they get what we call as letters of administration or letters testamentary, which gives that person the authority to go through with the sale of the property, you can sell it. So probate doesn't have to be complete because that funds can go into an escrow account when the property is sold. But they do have to have the authority from the court naming them as what we call preliminary letters of testamentary or preliminary letters of administration, and there's specific language that has to be obtained from the court in order to sell the property. Or if you're buying a property that's in probate, the seller has to make sure that they have those documents in order to sell the property, the authority.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys, everybody, so much. If you do have other questions, please reach out. We're all available. I'll be sending out information with all of our contact information after this. One more comment, 2 more messages. Oh, this thanking us. Thank you guys so much for joining and looking forward to working with you in the future if you decide to buy in Brooklyn. Thanks again. Oh, wait.